Hello and welcome to another edition of Cheers PA Beer Talk. I am your host, Mike Lintel, and today we have a very special switch up, and we're actually going to be talking about cider, given that it is October. Currently, it's National Apple Month, and we sit in one of the most beautiful apple growing regions in the state of Pennsylvania, here in Adams County, and it wouldn't be right to not highlight at least one of our great cider producers within the Commonwealth. And for that, I welcome in our guest today, Ben Wenk from Ploughman Cider. Very grateful to have some time with you today, sir. Thanks for joining the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the first thing we ask everyone in kind of a standard question for us is, what is the beer that really got you into craft beer or wanting to get into making your own beer? For you, maybe it was cider, and if you want to go the cider route, it's really just like, what was that beverage that captured your imagination that really pulled you towards this industry and wanting to be a part of it?
Sure. Well, I can remember it pretty vividly. I was attending a farmer's market with my dad in Philadelphia. The two of us were running the stand that day, and we had a pretty decent day, and we decided to go to the pub next door and celebrate our success at market, we'll say. And at the time, I was just out of college, discovering craft beer, and my first instinct was to find whatever tap handle I didn't recognize and order whatever they were pouring out of that tap. And when I saw a tap called Strongbow, I didn't even know it was cider. I just knew I hadn't had it before. And so I ordered it up, and it came out, and there was no head. And I tried. I'm like, man, this is cider. This is pretty good. At that point, that was not the first cider I'd had, but it was the first one that kind of had the balance and complexity that was my entry point into craft cider. And kind of from there, I was going down to places like Max's Tap House and Fells Point and finding some more unique ciders from around the world from there. But the original Strongbow on draft at the former Dark Horse Pub there on 2nd Street in Philadelphia, that was my entry point into cider, and started making it that fall just as a hobbyist, and kind of took over from there.
So you mentioned being at a market with your dad. You are 7th generation family farm that's been doing essentially the same thing on the same land for 6 generations previous to you. How do you convince that family that maybe there's something that they're not doing with their apples that would be a better thing for the business and for the future of the business? And how do you convince them that maybe they missed something in the first 6 generations and that the new generation's got something to offer? How does that go?
Sure. Well, I think the best way to answer that question is it started really with the farmers markets. When I came back from college, I kind of started the retail side of things at Ploughman, at Three Springs Fruit Farm, which is our family's orchard here in Aspers, Pennsylvania, and the northern part of Adams County. So, we got that thing started in 2007, which was the same year I had that Strongbow, the first year of market. And, I think my ability to convince my father and uncle, who are our farm owners and managers with me here at the farm, the first step in convincing them to do cider was I had shown at least, some good returns to the farm in pursuing that retail farmers market idea. I was able to execute that without creating too much problems for them, we'll say, and allowing them to continue to do the things that they were already doing well. I came back to the farm, and I wanted to add value, with my experience, with my education, and find new opportunities for the farm. So it started with the farmers market, and shortly after that, we saw other area farms getting interested, getting involved in it. Folks like Jack's, certainly Big Hill as well. Folks like Freycons out in Boyertown, folks that I already kind of knew about were getting interested as well. And the final step was, I put a full business plan together with a budget, talked to our kind of financing folks, and really kind of pitched it to my father and uncle the same as if I was pitching it to any other investors or something. Like we're still completely owned by the farm. We're still 100% family owned, but in order for me to show them that I had taken it seriously, I went through, the full presentation, like, here's what I think we need to get started. Here's, how I think we can, be successful, the connections we have, the full business plan, the justification for the new enterprise. And yeah, I was able to convince them, and we ordered up some cider variety trees and started making all the applications and all the licensing and all that stuff happen shortly after.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the trees, because that is something that I've always appreciated about you. The thing that really got me into cider at Big Hill was the agricultural component of it. And when you started, it sounds like you needed some fruit that wasn't already being grown. Like, I'm sure some of the apples you had there were good for making cider, but to really make the cider that you had envisioned, this was a long vision that you have, because when you're growing apples, you're not just planting something and that fall you're reaping a harvest. I mean, can you give a little bit of a timeline in terms of, like, you put a fresh stick in the ground, when are you going to pull fruit that's actually going to be worth making into cider, on an estimate even?
Sure. So, even with today's dwarfing rootstock technology, which is a whole nother conversation.
We don't have time for that, Ben. Don't go into the dwarf rootstock. I appreciate it, and we can do that later. We'll talk about the dwarves later, but the dwarfing rootstock is too much for what we have in this time today.
Understood. Albeit to say that, the turnaround time is much faster now than it would have been in my grandfather's generation. Mm-hmm. So we can plant a tree in the ground and start bringing, significant harvest of that fruit, in maybe a 4 to 5 year time frame, when that used to be more like an 8, 10, 12 year time frame. But even still, that's a process. That's why, the moment that we decided to make this move and start making cider, we knew we had to act quickly to get the right fruit trees ordered, planted in the ground. And just to harken back to my previous answer just a little bit, I had already made that business plan by the time I saw Steve Wood talk on the PBS documentary of Botany of Desire. And I think the first thing he said on camera is that hard cider or alcoholic cider is not a value-added product. And I literally just got done with my business plan, and I had written up that that it was. And he went on to explain that if you're going to make proper cider, it requires cider-specific apple varieties, and that by the time you're planting those, there's no secondary use for those apples, and it can't be a value-added product if there's no other way to use those fruit. And I'm like,
so
you know what?
technically he was right, but in my opinion, his outlook on cider and what, like, the growth of cider and like young cider makers doesn't necessarily jive with kind of where your energy was at that time. I mean, he's been making cider for a long time in a very specific way, with fruit trees that have had the time to develop the flavors and the character that you need for truly original, cider, where you're just at the beginning of that journey, but you're doing it with an infrastructure that can support, like, really going for it, because you have that farm business there. And that can help support and also open up avenues for you to just kind of get your name out there. So it's a softer landing spot than someone that I'm sure he was speaking to of, hey, if you're going to go full bore on this, it's a bad idea. But you had some measures in place that really gave you an opportunity to go for this dream. And so you're now seeing that fruit, right? Because the time has passed where you're starting to really get into some of those early plantings. How have you seen the returns so far, and what are you liking coming out of the orchard right now?
Sure. And Steve Wood's words, in a lot of ways, they changed my way of thinking, but we still make a lot of cider with varieties that have multiple uses. But what we are enjoying, as we're seeing some of those early trees start to bear fruit and start to make cider from them, certainly one of our favorites, and one that we planted a fair amount of, is Dabonet, and that's a variety that originated in England, and is grown here in the United States by quite a few cider making orchards here in the East Coast, and it just has this this kind of rich complexity and a little bit of it's a bittersweet, so it's got a little bit of tannins in addition to the sugars, and we find it a great apple to blend with. So that's been an early winner so far. Stoke Red, which I know that Big Hill Cider just released their Stoke Red single varietal. I've yet to try it. I got to get out there and check that out. That's a variety we like a good bit as well. Ashmead's Kernel, Sopa Spitzenberg, Wixon. These are all varieties that we really, really are enjoying making cider with. So, yeah, we're discovering some really interesting fruit that grow well in our climate that produce some really nice juice, and we're encouraged by what we've seen so far, and we're excited about, as these trees mature and we're able to harvest more fruit, the kinds of products we can make going forward is really exciting.
So I find you mentioned the climate, and I don't think there's a better place, in my opinion, to grow apples, and like the quality and the explosiveness of the flavors that come out of that fruit on a good year. Even on tough years where there's a lot of rain, you're still carrying a pretty decent apple. Like I think back a couple years ago where it was just an absolute washout, and the flavors and the sugars, everything was way down, but you still had a decent apple that you would think of at a cafeteria as a small child at your school, being like, this tastes like an apple. But when you taste a really great apple from this area, it is explosive in the flavor. And it has to be the terroir, right? Like it has to be the South Mountain and the geography and geology and the meteorology and all the ologies lining up to be the perfect place, right? Like, can you explain just like how perfect of a place to grow apples like this little area of Adams County in Pennsylvania is?
Yeah, absolutely. Our South Mountain region here is blessed with really, first of all, great soils. We have deep, well-drained soils, which is really important for perennial crops, and specifically apples as well. They're a very deep-rooted plant, and having those deep, well-drained soils is really a top requirement for growing tree fruit well. Certainly another aspect that we really benefit from is the air drainage. All these beautiful rolling hills that not only provide such a beautiful landscape for those of us who are fortunate enough to live and work where we do, all those hillsides help divert the coldest of air during spring blossom time when our entire crop is vulnerable to cold weather. All that coldest of air is going to kind of drift down and sink down into low-lying areas, and as a result, when we plant those hillsides in our region, I'll never go so far as to say that we're frost free, but we have a reputation going back 100 years now as being one of the areas in the East Coast for apples that is the most the least susceptible to frost damage. So that has a big part to play as well, and certainly the South Mountain can protect us in a lot of cases from severe weather events. There's plenty of times where we can see those thunderheads coming right for the mountain and then just kind of disperse a little bit. There's just and it's the people in the infrastructure too, because we've had an apple industry for so long here. We're very fortunate that if we run over a ladder in the orchard or something, and we're short a ladder or two, we can, there's places we can go and drive and pick these things up. Whereas other areas in the East Coast that, they might have to put in an order and wait for them to show up on a parcel truck or something. That infrastructure is really pivotal, and having, all the knowledge going back generations of folks who have been there and seen it and done it before, all these things just kind of come together to make a really ideal place to grow tree fruit, and high quality tree fruit. And certainly the sunshine and the heat and the unique quality of our climate play a big role in that as well. It's going to be warmer than northern climates, but still hardy enough that we're able to get the proper dormancy and all those things. It doesn't affect the varieties that grow here well as it might in other climates. So that's as short as I can make that.
No, and that's beautiful. And that kind of leads in perfectly to my question of, what's it like being a young farmer and looking out on just the climate crisis that our world finds itself in, and knowing that you make your living and your family for generations has made their living off of this land. I mean, it sounds like you have some safety measures and feeling by where you're at specifically when it comes to climate change, but just like at some point, too much is too much. And like, how do you see your role as being this young farmer in this state that has such a strong agricultural leaning and has this great history of agriculture? Like, where do you see your generation and people like you making their stand when it comes to the climate crisis that we're in?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing I'll say about that is I'm very grateful to have a farm, and we're a fairly diversified farm in terms of the things that we grow, especially when it comes to the things we take to farmers markets. But as a farm that's still predominantly apples at something like 60% of our acreage, the fact that we're growing apples is I'm very grateful for it, because apples are pretty resilient when it comes right down to it, and very adaptable, and that's one of the things I love about them. But in terms of like some of the things that I'm kind of, concerned about or working through. I mean, very famously, my grandfather, lived here and farmed here his whole life, and he never saw hail on his farm. As a matter of fact, the one time it did hail when he was alive, my dad was here covering for him when he was on a trip to visit family, and my dad says he feels like it was all his fault. It was his whole thing. But for my grandfather lived here and farmed here for as long as he did without hail, and then having hail be I mean, what do you think, Mike?
Perennial, monthly, like it is like more likely than not every growing season that you will see hail at least once a month. Like in that window of what do you call it? June through August, now even maybe possibly September, but like that 2.5 month span, you're seeing hail quite frequently, at least some part of the county, not everywhere, full blankets, but yeah, it's pretty common. And that's why it blew my mind when you said that your grandfather had farmed and never seen hail, where to me, I've been here 6 years and it's something that I'm very familiar with. And your heart sinks every time you hear that somebody got hit, and it's just part of farming now. And it's wild.
Yeah, it's a constant thought during that time of year. And and this is I think, in my opinion, the role that cider can play in orchards here in the South Mountain region, and more broadly in a wider region of the United States, because when all of a sudden you're changing the goalpost, right? Like when our farm used to be predominantly processing, and then later for fresh market, there's some incredibly high standards that those fruit have to live up to from a really aesthetic type of analysis, right?
Grocery shoppers don't want ugly fruit. They
got to look like they're coming out of a cookie cutter. They've got to be blemish free. They've got to be highly colored. And we're able to grow that kind of fruit in Adams County, and it's why this region continues to thrive and have an agricultural economy around apples. But looking into a future that's more uncertain with kind of more severe weather events like the ones we're talking about, cider is a product that no one ever has to see if those apples going through our press have a couple hail marks on them. You'll never taste that in the finished product. And that building our business in a way that makes more cider is to me kind of a little bit of an insurance policy against extreme weather events. That's certainly a big part of the way I think about the future of our operation here. And the second part along with that is as the climate continues to change, what varieties are going to grow better in the future than what more so than other ones. We're going through some really high volume tests of apple varieties in our test block right now, grafting a lot of new things ourselves, varieties that were traditional cider making varieties down in Virginia and south of us. other parts of the world, different apples that I think might do really well at farmers market. We've been doing a lot of bench grafting in our winter times so that we can really put these new cultivars out into the field and see what they actually look like in our climate and see what the future might be for unique apple varieties in our Adams County, South Mountain region, and using actual field trials, not just what somebody told you about it. So those are the two ways I'm thinking about it.
Well, and if a tree is going to survive and you planted it this year, going through the cicada blossom that we saw and just like the stress event on the local trees that was, I mean, anything that comes through this, to plant them all. Like that's
right.
That's the future right there. Indestructible. It's like the Twinkie of trees.
Yep, exactly. Nothing will be left but cockroaches, Twinkies, and apple trees, right?
Only certain ones that you will be the one that knows about. So you also, in your spare time that you have, obviously, are the president. You still the president of the Pennsylvania Cider Guild?
Yes, absolutely.
So what is the importance, in your opinion, of having a guild around building this industry up? Because from what it sounds like, it's pretty young in Pennsylvania in terms of like cider makers on a scale of more than 10 across the state. And it's something that's growing in popularity, but how does one manage that? And where do you see just like the importance of Pennsylvania when it comes to this emerging cider culture and tradition?
Sure. Well, I mean, just right off the bat, just like any young industry anywhere, our resources are few and our needs are great. That's the nature of being new at anything. And that's certainly the case with our Pennsylvania cider industry. And the only way we can make anything happen with those circumstances if we're all pulling the rope in the same direction. And so, I've just been so very just thrilled to see so many producers from all over our Commonwealth here come together and volunteer their time. We actually have a meeting today at 5 o'clock with some pressing business on the agenda, and just the people's willingness to combine to volunteer their time. I mean, everyone who works in our industry is busy. Many of them working several jobs in addition to their cider making to make sure that they're able to do what they love and make great products, and they're whether it's legislative concerns or educational opportunities, engaging with the public, educating them, educating buyers, just working with other industries around the state. It's it takes a lot of volunteer time, a lot of volunteer effort, and again, I'm so grateful for the folks we have on the board and the volunteers and the other people that are active in the guild. It's it's really encouraging to see, and we've been very grateful to be growing even through the pandemic. Our membership numbers are up. It's a growing guild. It's a growing industry, and it's really a testament to the incredible producers we have all over the state.
So if people are listening to this and they're interested in supporting Pennsylvania's growing hard cider, is there a place that people can come be members or like support the guild?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find all that information on our website, paciderguild.org, and we do have membership for enthusiasts. So it's awesome. it's a very affordable yearly membership. You'll be kind of first in the know as different events and different opportunities to interact with makers and producers all over the state come about. You'll have the satisfaction of knowing that you're playing an important role in helping our organization grow and help bring more cider to more Pennsylvanians every day. So yeah, definitely encourage you. There's a couple exciting things we'll be able to announce soon as far as things on our website at paciderguild.org. They're coming down the pike real soon, and they're really exciting, and we'll be updating that as soon as things fall into place.
That's awesome, man. That's really exciting. It's such a great place to live in Pennsylvania when it comes to just having access to quality apples. But the better apples make the better cider, and seeing this excellent product get into the hands of such talented cider makers and really seeing where each one goes. I always enjoyed pressing apples this time of year for other producers that would come out to the farm to get some juice from us, because you never knew where that same juice that we would have a little bit of us and then they'd have some of it, and see how those two paths diverge and getting to enjoy both of them down the road. It was always such a great treat. So you're doing great work. The Guild is tremendously talented and wildly understaffed in terms of like the need versus just what can actually be done. But it's great work, what y'all are doing with that. And it's been amazing to see it just continue to grow year after year. Looking forward to another Cider Fest down the road. I'm sure one of those may or may not be coming, but we'll just wait for those updates. I guess one last thing before we get out of here. One of the best things that I think I enjoyed in the first 6 months of the pandemic was when you had the Barton Hall Grateful Dead live stream show. And it was just so nice getting to spend an evening with music, with people, and just kind of like interact, even though we were all listening to a 40-year-old recording of a show that we've probably listened to at least more than 10 times, I'll say for myself. I don't want to out anybody, but it's a really great show and one that gets a lot of rotation. You seem to have a very good handle on music is important when it comes to bringing people together. So you have the cider part, you have the tap room, but like the part that seems to always be present with anything that Ploughman's attached to is great music, local music, and providing a showcase for this emerging industry, just along with cider in this region. I'm seeing a lot of new musicians that are really finding their voices, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. And so having someone with a venue that supports that creative process has been really refreshing and really enjoyable from just the music standpoint. So long-winded way of saying, why do you like music, Ben?
Well, I kind of came by that naturally when I was in middle school and high school. It was a real passion of mine. And as I kind of got older and saw that my kind of professional career was going to move in a more agricultural direction, one of the things that kind of stayed with me was, like music's still going to be a passion of mine. And it's, I guess the thing that really comes to mind is our kind of central Pennsylvania community really does have a cool scene, and we've always had a cool scene as far as the music scene goes. And it's, it's been one that has not been dominated by kind of cookie cutter cover bands and tribute bands and things like that. It's been kind of, a steady, like kind of tribe of people making original music and writing and doing interesting things and like making their own sound. And I'm certainly not alone in going out of my way to support those artists in that scene, but it sure does give me a lot of satisfaction. And I've just, it's a direct result of my upbringing around great musicians and the support that I received as a young musician. And, now being in a position to kind of, give back to that same community that kind of raised me is really, really important. And it's just, it's one of the more gratifying things of being able to work in the beverage industry is its tie to the music industry, and how those two things come together is just, it's so rewarding and so gratifying. And it's just wonderful to interact with both worlds.
Well, from my perspective, I just appreciate someone that's doing it with a love for the artist and not for a love of what the artist does for the establishment. So I think it's really nice to see someone that is giving space to performances without expecting it to be, hey, we need you to return X number of seats or this many drinks. You look at it as it's part of the environment, and you are supporting all of these parts. And it's really great to see someone supporting the industry like that. So thank you for that.
Of course. Yeah, it's just all about creating good experiences around cider, and the music really helps with that.
So if people want to check out these experiences, where can they find, lists of upcoming events, or how do they stay current on Ploughman if they want to order some cider? Give the people the information so they can reach out.
Sure thing. So great place to start, ploughmancider.com. Our website has a link to our tap room. You can get information about how to join us there in the square of Gettysburg, information about our cider club, purchasing bottles that ship to 40 states. All those things are good. Social media is probably the most up-to-date places. So at Ploughman Cider on Instagram, facebook.com/Ploughman Cider, and there's separate pages for social for the tap room if you're local to our central Pennsylvania region. So
thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate it. Our guest today, Ben Wenk from Ploughman Cider, Three Springs Fruit Farm. Check him out at a farmer's market or on the square in Gettysburg. Real quick, when I moved here, someone told me that it's called a squarecle, and then everyone else told me it's not a squarecle. So Gettysburg is a round square. Is that a squarecle, or is that not really a thing?
That's the first I've ever heard that.
All right, not a thing. Got it. Totally embarrassed myself. On that note, I want to thank my friend Ben Wenk, who totally disregarded squarecle and threw me under the bus. Go find his cider. His cider is better than his help in that moment. I promise you.
You chose a poor ally, Mike.
Yeah, I'm not very good at that. But if you enjoyed today's show, you want to check out other interviews, check out our YouTube channel. We're also available on all podcasts, wherever you get your shows, your programs, or whatever you want to call them. Go find us. Cheers PA Beer Talk. Like, subscribe, follow, unfollow. Maybe do the thing a couple times. Help us with the numbers. But whatever, just show us some support so we can keep doing this. Thanks again to our friends at Wise Markets for making this possible, and our dear friend Ben Wenk from Ploughman Cider. Until next time, cheers, PA.